In his Treatise of Human Nature, Hume argues that causation involves the following three relations between objects, or as we now conceive of the causal relata between events. First, contiguity. Causes and effects are contiguous in both space and time. Subsequently, priority. A cause must temporarily precede its effect. And finally, necessity. If A causes B, then there is a necessary connection between A and B. Not a logical connection, of course, because A's occurrence without B's occurrence remains logically possible, but rather a natural connection. Importantly, Hume also notes here that when observing instances of cause and effect, all he perceives are the contiguity and succession of events, but he has no impression of a necessary connection between them. In his inquiry concerning human understanding, Hume offers a psychological explanation of the idea of a necessary connection. We can acquire it from the observation of multiple instances. However, this idea originates in our minds, not in the world. We derive it from feelings of expectation and anticipation. So our belief that there is necessity in the world boils down to a projection of our mind onto the world. Finally, let's also consider Hume's answer in the inquiry to the constitutive question, what is causation? Quote, we may define a cause to be an object followed by another, and where all objects similar to the first are followed by objects similar to the second. Or in other words, if the first object had not been, the second never had existed, unquote. This is quite interesting because by using or in other words, Hume suggests that the two definitions he puts forward are equivalent. They aren't. As a matter of fact, the first definition captures the gist of the regularity theory of causation, and the second definition that of the counterfactual theory of causation. Both are reductive approaches, both try, in line with Hume, to avoid situating necessity in the world, but nevertheless, there are some telling differences between them. Here is how the regularity theory fleshes out Hume's idea. Event A causes event B, event only if, firstly, event A is spatiotemporally contiguous with event B, or there is a chain of contiguous causes and effects between A and B. Subsequently, event A precedes event B in time, and finally, all events of the type that A is are followed by events of the type that B is. There are possible counterexamples to the first two conditions. Is contiguity a necessary condition? Cases of action at spatial and/or temporal distance suggest that contiguity isn't necessary. We can think of imaginary cases, like a magic spell striking someone dead without a mediating chain, or of real-world cases, like in some interpretations of quantum mechanics. Subsequently, is priority a necessary condition? Backward causation suggests priority isn't necessary, but of course backward causation is itself contentious. In any case, many philosophers believe that the direction of causation is a substantive issue that cannot be solved by mere stipulation. Thomas Reid, who disagreed with Hume on almost everything, also offered a counterexample to the effect that the three conditions are not sufficient of causality. Time and again, night follows day and day follows night. But night doesn't cause day, does it? However, the third condition is the most controversial. Can't unique events be causes? If not, should we conclude that the Big Bang didn't cause anything? Elaborating on that, how similar should events be in order to constitute a type? Similar in all respects, both intrinsically and relationally? That's impossible, because then they are identical. Similar in some respects then? Okay, but that obviously raises the question, which respects? The relevant respects? The answer can hardly be the causally relevant respects. Now let's consider the counterfactual theory that A is a cause of B if and only if A and B occur, and if A had not occurred, B would not have occurred. Or in an equivalent formulation, B counterfactually depends on A. An interesting version of the counterfactual theory has been developed and defended by David Lewis. It avoids appealing to natural necessity by appealing to another kind of entity, namely possible worlds, so that necessity isn't a feature of any particular possible world, more particularly of our actual world, but rather a matter of relations between possible worlds. Modality is an interworld and not an intra-world matter. However, there are lots of possible worlds that cause trouble. Hundreds of thought experiments illustrate that the counterfactual theory cannot handle redundant causation. Consider, for example, preemption. In fact, Stefan causes Tim to laugh, but had Stefan failed to cause Tim to laugh, Tjomme would have caused Tim to laugh instead. So the counterfactual condition isn't met, for Tim would have laughed even if Stefan wasn't successful. Similarly, the counterfactual theory also faces problems of overdetermination. Think of the execution of Tim by a small firing squad. And suppose Stefan and Tjomme fire lethal shots at the very same time. Now Tim has died as a result of the shots by Stefan and Tjomme. But you cannot say that Stefan's shot caused the death of Tim, because if Stefan didn't shoot, Tim would still have died. Obviously, the same applies to Tjomme's shot in relation to Tim's death. So now we have the very odd situation that neither Stefan's lethal shot nor Tjomme's lethal shot caused the death of Tim.